There are two tight ends in particular that really screw up these rankings today. Brock Bowers and Travis Kelce. You've got one Hall of Fame tight end towards the end of his career, without a doubt, and the other one, the best rookie prospect at the tight end position that we have seen since Kyle Pitts. But I tell you what, that does not screw up number one, Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions is really in a tier by himself for a good reason. Number one, this guy's 23 years old. So we know that if things go correctly, we could see this guy for another decade dominated the tight end position on the Detroit Lions. He's got Ben Johnson back as well as the offensive coordinator. Ben Johnson makes a world of difference. No matter how you cut it, it was a blessing for Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Jared Goff that he did not become a head coach during the 2024 offseason. And obviously you can see on the screen, this guy in his rookie season, 10 touchdowns, 7 targets per game. So he was already super involved, and he was getting 11.5 fantasy points per game in a half PPR format. So Sam Laporta, to me, I don't care what way you cut this. In a dynasty league, I think he's on his own. And I have 2 and 3, Trey McBride and Mark Andrews here. So here's my rationale for this. This one actually took a lot of thinking for me. So I could have went with a lot of guys here too. There was guys like Dalton Kincaid that crossed my mind. TJ Hockenson crossed my mind. The reason I went with Trey McBride is because when I think about Dalton Kincaid and when I think about TJ Hockenson, I've got serious questions and concerns for both of those guys that I'll get into here in a little bit. Well, Trey McBride doesn't really have any more questions or concerns than either of those two guys. So Trey McBride, you can see those numbers on the screen, but the reality is that a lot of that production came in the back half of the season. That was when Trey McBride started to dominate, is when they finally said, you know what, we're done with Zach Ertz. It's over. We're just going to play our young stud at the tight end position. And Trey McBride started winning people weeks. That's the thing, is Trey McBride is capable, as he displayed this year, to get you 20, 25, 30-point games in fantasy football, half PPR or full PPR. This guy is also playing with a very good quarterback with Kyler Murray. Good in real life, we can have that discussion. Definitely good in fantasy football. And Trey McBride, as of today, the filming in mid-March, well, he's their primary option. So maybe they do something in the draft to get an upgrade, but that's not the case right now. And Mark Andrews at 3, listen, the reason I put him behind Trey McBride is the following. Number one, this guy's going to be 29 years old about mid-season. So this guy is obviously not in the, he's not a spring chicken. We'll just say that in the NFL. And he's also coming off a major injury. Now, I understand he came back, he played in the playoffs this year. That's totally fine. It's not like he's all of a sudden just going to become some bad player just because of the injury. But when I look at this, would I rather have a young Trey McBride, and Trey McBride is 24, or would I rather have Mark Andrews for a couple more really good seasons? Well, they're really close, and that's why they're here in the same tier, is because I wouldn't mind if you put Mark Andrews above Trey McBride. I'm going to take the guy who's about 4.5 years younger than Mark Andrews, who has had multiple injuries throughout his career, and we'll see what his timeline looks like. At number 4, I've got Dalton Kincaid one spot above TJ Hockenson at number 5. So Dalton Kincaid, I have a feeling we're going to get some pushback for having him at number 4. And I think it's honestly, I think it's a very good ranking for him. Dalton Kincaid is 24 years old, right? So he's obviously at the age that you really want to see. And when you see this numbers on the screen right here, like, it wasn't like his rookie season was just bad. Again, it was very similar to Trey McBride, where he kind of had a tale of 2 seasons. The beginning of the season, he was totally irrelevant. And then Dawson Knox went down. Well, Dalton Kincaid started to dominate. And then when Dawson Knox did come back, they, didn't put him on the bench, but they were not using him quite as much. Well, that's my problem. And that's what I was discussing with Trey McBride just a couple minutes ago, is when I look at Dalton Kincaid, I see a guy who's obviously a very good athlete, a very good tight end that showed a lot of upside in Dynasty Fantasy Football in his rookie year alone. Here's the problem. He's got a $53 million problem with Dawson Knox. They just signed him to that not long ago either. So the likelihood that Dawson Knox gets cast aside right after he hammers that big contract, it's very slim. So I like this. I like the upside with Joe Brady at coordinator, but this is a problem with Dawson Knox. It's going to cap his upside for at least the next year or two. So I see that problem. And TJ Hockenson, I just see a couple more problems. Again, probably people out there who are going to say he should be higher. 26 years old. Again, coming off a really good season when he played. 11.4 fantasy points per game and only on 5 touchdowns, which is very impressive. Think back to when we were talking about Sam Laporta, 11.5 fantasy points per game, 10 touchdowns. So TJ Hockenson was incredibly important in this Minnesota Vikings offense. There's no question, I think he's a great talent. Here's what I do question. Number one, how does he come back off the injury? He's at a young enough age to where I think probably could come back okay. But listen, this is a bigger guy. Tight ends don't always recover as gracefully from lower body injuries, especially to their knee. Number two, what's the change going to be at quarterback this year? So if Kirk Cousins doesn't come back, and I have a feeling he's not going to come back, what's the move at quarterback? Can another quarterback that they bring in support Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hockenson at the level that they were all producing in 2023? Well, that's a legitimate question here. So TJ Hockenson, I have some concerns moving forward here, but obviously still a great tight end player in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Number 6, Kyle Pitts starts out the new tier here, and I've got Brock Bowers at number 7 here. So Kyle Pitts is obviously, I discussed this a couple weeks ago with Kyle Pitts. Listen, we all acknowledge the talent is there. He's 23 years old too. Like, not only has it not worked out yet, but there's a large portion of us that believe it's bound to happen. And I still believe it is. Like, I do believe that his time is coming. You look at what he's done from a volume perspective, and he's still very important to this offense. Like, 5 targets per game is not a bad number at all. You know, the problem is that he's never fulfilled a ceiling that we've all envisioned. And the other problem is that this guy's floor is low. I mean, this is just not a player who has a high floor, and it's not all on him. A lot of it is offensive coaching, Arthur Smith looking right at you, and quarterback issues, Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, just a bunch of garbage over the years that Kyle Pitts has had to deal with. And that's my problem, is that, yes, Arthur Smith is gone, but they hired a defensive head coach, so what's the offensive play here? And what's the quarterback play here? We know they're not going to go into the season again with Desmond Ridder. If they do, the coach deserves to be fired before he even begins his job. I mean, seriously, Desmond Ridder cannot be the quarterback. There's a lot of dysfunction associated with Kyle Pitts. So yes, I do believe that his time is coming, but it 100% hinges on a quarterback for him to fulfill a ceiling that we all believe he does have. At number 7, Brock Bowers. This is just me saying, listen, Brock Bowers, I got some flack for him. On my top overall 2024 Dynasty rookie rankings, I got some flack for him. And listen, I get it. Like, Brock Bowers is the best tight end prospect, as I said earlier, since Kyle Pitts. This is a great tight end prospect. 21 years old, guy's young. Dude's definitely going to go in the top half of the first round. Like, we all understand that Brock Bowers is going to be likely a very good player in the NFL. Well, Brock Bowers does have, you know, it's 100% dependent on quarterback, right? Like, and I'm not saying that Michael Mayer of last year was as good of a prospect as Brock Bowers. That's just not true. But what I will say is that, like, Michael Mayer was at one time viewed as the best prospect in 2023. Dalton Kincaid shot right up above him. Why? Because he went to the Buffalo Bills in the first round. So what if Brock Bowers gets drafted to New England? Probably not going to happen. They're not going to draft him that early. But that's just an example here. What if he gets drafted to a terrible offense? So we got to leave a little bit of room for negotiation here when it comes to Brock Bowers' value in Dynasty right now. Number 8, George Kittle, and I've got the other old guy, Travis Kelce at number 9. Listen, they stay in this tier because they just still provide value. I mean, that's just the reality here is when we look at George Kittle and when we look at Travis Kelce and the numbers they put up this year. It wasn't a super phenomenal season from either one of them. Like, that wasn't obviously Travis Kelce's best season. It wasn't George Kittle's best season. You know, the reality with these guys is that both of them are still ultra important to their offense. And Travis Kelce, I have more concerns with. That's why he's a level lower. And I'm really curious to see what everybody's thoughts are in the community on this one. Please let me know in the comments what you think about this ranking, where he should be ranked. Travis Kelce, the reason I have him below George Kittle is because, well, he's about 4.5 years younger than George Kittle. George Kittle's 30, Travis Kelce's 34, will be 35 mid-season this year. So, Travis Kelce, we obviously saw him slow down a lot too. I mean, he turned it on in the playoffs, credit to him, but he definitely was not the player that we're used to in 2023. George Kittle, I would argue, still a very, very good player. So, George Kittle, I still believe, has some dynasty value over Travis Kelce at this point in both of their careers. Number 10, Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet is 24 years old, and I actually think pretty undervalued in Dynasty. Listen, this guy's 24 years old. He's young, and he just signed a big contract in Chicago before last season. So before 2023, the dude's under contract for big money, like 50, 60 million in that particular range. Cole Kmet is 100% going to be a part of this team's plan. So add on top of the fact that in all likelihood, he will be getting Caleb Williams at quarterback. Well, I like Justin Fields personally. I really like him in fantasy. But there's no question to me, I think Caleb Williams is a better quarterback than Justin Fields. So, yes, Justin Fields did spend a lot of time throwing Cole Kmet the ball. And who knows if, Caleb Williams is going to be as into the idea of throwing to a tight end as frequently as Justin Fields. But Cole Kmet, this guy has the propensity for big games like very few tight ends do, actually. And it's a lot more than the next guy on the list, Evan Ingram at 11, who is 29 years old and definitely has more holes. Evan Ingram is more consistent than a guy like Cole Kmet. But I would not say that, you look at the past several years, Evan Ingram just simply hasn't had the propensity for big games as often as Cole Kmet does. He doesn't boom like Cole Kmet with 2 to 3 touchdown games. Cole Kmet can do that. Evan Ingram isn't that guy. He's just more of a steady Eddie for Trevor Lawrence. So, and that there's value in that too. Like, I do believe that Evan Ingram still has plenty of dynasty value. He's under contract, under a long-term deal. And yes, he's 29, but this guy can still play. He had a very good season last year. Like, Evan Ingram, you can see the numbers on the screen. For a long time, this dude was underperforming. But the reality was that he went through a lot of this 2023 season without a freaking touchdown. He didn't get a touchdown until like the last quarter of the season. Then when he got the touchdowns, he became the tight end 2 in fantasy. Because he had all those targets. Look at the targets per game. 8.5 targets per game almost. So I think he's going to continue to be very steady for Trevor Lawrence. There's going to be more question marks at the wide receiver position. So yeah, I do believe that Evan Ingram has plenty of dynasty value still. To round it out at number 12, I've got Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. He's 25 years old, and listen, I could have went with a couple guys here. I was considering David Njoku. I was considering Dallas Goedert. But the reason I went with Jake Ferguson is because, number one, he's younger than both of those guys. So that's obviously a major factor when it comes to dynasty. Number two, you look at the history of Dallas tight ends with Dak Prescott. I mean, even with Tony Romo, Dallas tight ends are successful in fantasy football. That's just the reality here. So I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination is Jake Ferguson some, elite athlete. Neither was Dalton Schultz, and he had plenty of success with Dallas. So the question becomes, when do they extend him at some point? Do they hold on to him, or do they just let him play out his rookie contract? He's got a couple more years on it. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I know for the time being, with Dak Prescott, Jake Ferguson is going to continue to put up pretty steady numbers in Dynasty Fantasy Football. As always, let me know what you think of these rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered about Dynasty Fantasy Football. This one is a really interesting topic. I always love ranking tight ends because there's a lot of dissent and people value tight ends differently in every single league. And if you are interested in learning more about this year's Dynasty rookie class and you want to just see the top rankings of the overall players, click on this video right here.